respect it. Nobody tells men that love will test your strength more than your struggle ever will. Nobody tells men that the same heart that makes you feel alive can also leave you questioning your worth in the middle of the night. And nobody tells men that sometimes the hardest truth about love is realizing you were never taught how to receive it the right way. A man can work 12 hours a day, fight through pressure, carry responsibilities on his shoulders, and still feel empty when he walks into a silent room with nobody who truly understands him. That's the truth most men hide, because from a young age, men are taught how to survive, but nobody teaches them how to heal. Nobody teaches them how to love without fear, without ego, without pretending to be stronger than they really are. And that's where the story begins. I want you to imagine a man named Marcus, not a perfect man, not a rich man, not a famous man, just a hard-working man trying to build a life. Marcus grew up hearing the same words many boys hear. Stop crying. Be a man. Handle it yourself. Don't let emotions make you weak. So Marcus learned how to stay quiet. He learned how to bury pain under work, bury heartbreak under pride, and bury loneliness under fake smiles. And the dangerous thing about that kind of pain is this: eventually you stop recognizing yourself. Marcus became successful. He had a decent job, nice clothes, respect from people around him. On the outside, it looked like life was finally rewarding him. But deep down, there was still something missing. Then one day, he met a woman named Elena. Now listen carefully, because this is where many men misunderstand love. When Marcus first met Elena, he thought love was about impressing her. He thought if he bought enough gifts, said the right words, and looked strong all the time, she would stay forever. That's what most men are taught. They believe love is earned through performance instead of connection. So Marcus performed. He paid for expensive dinners he couldn't really afford. He acted confident even when he was insecure. He pretended he had no fears, no weaknesses, no wounds. And for a while, it worked. Elena smiled. She laughed. She stayed close. But real love always reaches the truth eventually. One night, Elena looked at Marcus and asked him a simple question. What are you afraid of? And Marcus froze. Not because he didn't hear her, because no one had ever asked him that before. You see, men are often loved for what they provide, not for who they are. And after years of hearing that your value comes from your success, your strength, your money, your achievements, you forget how to talk about your soul. Marcus changed the subject. He joked. He smiled. But inside, he panicked, because the truth was, he was afraid of everything. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of being abandoned. Afraid of failing. Afraid of opening up and looking weak. But men don't usually say those things out loud, and that silence destroys relationships every single day. See, the truth about love nobody tells men is this: women cannot heal wounds they are never allowed to see. A lot of men think vulnerability pushes love away, but the right vulnerability builds connection. There's a difference between weakness and honesty. Weakness gives up. Honesty opens the door to trust, but Marcus didn't know that yet. So instead of opening his heart, he kept wearing the mask. And slowly, Elena began feeling lonely beside a man she loved. That's another truth nobody talks about. A woman can sit right next to a man and still feel miles away from him emotionally. Marcus thought being a good man meant paying bills and solving problems. And yes, responsibility matters. A man should protect and provide. But love is deeper than money, deeper than appearance, deeper than status. A woman wants to feel your presence, not just your performance. She wants to know what keeps you awake at night, what hurt you, what shaped you, what you dream about when nobody's watching. But Marcus has spent his entire life building walls so high that even he couldn't climb over them anymore. One evening, after another argument, Elena finally says something that shattered him. You talk to everyone except me. That sentence hit Marcus harder than any insult ever could, because deep down, he knew she was right. He could discuss business with strangers, laugh with coworkers, talk sports with friends for hours, but when it came to expressing his real emotions to the woman he loved, he became silent.
Wow.
Because many men grow up believing emotions make them less masculine. But let me tell you something powerful. A man who can face his emotions is stronger than a man who hides from them. Anybody can run. To end from pain, anybody can shut down. Anybody can pretend they don't care. But it takes real courage to say, I'm hurting. I'm scared. I need love too. Marcus didn't learn that lesson until it was almost too late. One rainy night, Elena packed a small bag and left the apartment after another cold argument. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she was exhausted from trying to reach a man who refused to open the door emotionally. And when the apartment became silent, Marcus finally heard the truth he had been avoiding for years. Loneliness sounds louder after love leaves. That night, Marcus sat alone on the edge of his bed staring at the dark ceiling. No television, no music, no distractions, just silence. And silence forces honesty. For the first time in his life, Marcus stopped blaming work, stress, pressure, and other people. For the first time, he asked himself the question men rarely ask. Why am I so afraid to be loved deeply, not desired, not admired, not respected from a distance? Love. Because real love requires exposure. Real love sees the parts of you you've been hiding from the world. And many men fear that kind of exposure because they were there. Is to believe their pain makes them unworthy. Marcus remembered being a little boy watching his father struggle in silence. His father never cried, never talked about emotions, never apologized. He carried stress like a soldier going to war every day, and Marcus admired him for it. But now, sitting alone in that apartment, Marcus realized something heartbreaking. His father survived life, but he never truly connected emotionally with the people who loved him. And Marcus had become exactly the same. That's how pain travels from one generation to another, not through words, through behavior. Nobody teaches men how to process heartbreak. Nobody teaches men how to express fear. Nobody teaches men that emotional honesty is not weakness. So men become experts at hiding. And the scary part is this: eventually a man can hide from himself so long that he forgets what he truly feels. Days passed. Marcus went to work, came home, ate alone, slept alone. But Elena's absence kept teaching him lessons her presence never could. That's another truth about love nobody tells men. Sometimes you don't understand someone's value until their energy disappears from your life. He missed you, the small things, the way she asked if he ate dinner, the way she touched his shoulder while passing by, the way she looked at him when he doubted himself. And suddenly Marcus understood something most men realize too late. Love is not built in grand moments. It's built in consistent emotional presence, not just being physically there, emotionally there. Weeks later, Marcus saw an older man sitting alone in a coffee shop after work. The man looked peaceful, calm, wise. Somehow they started talking. And during that conversation, the older man said words Marcus would never forget. Son, most men spend their whole lives trying to be respected while secretly starving to be understood. Marcus felt those words in his chest. Because it was true. Men want love too. Men want comfort too. Men want reassurance too. But many men are too ashamed to admit it. So instead they act distant, cold, detached, not because they don't care, because they're terrified of needing someone emotionally. The older man leaned closer and said, "You know what destroys most relationships?" Marcus shook his head. Pride. And that word sat heavy between them. Pride makes a man apologize too late. Pride makes a man act unbothered when he's hurting. Pride makes a man lose people he loves because he's too afraid to look vulnerable. Marcus drove home that night with tears in his eyes because for the first time he realized love was never the enemy. Fear was. Fear of rejection. Fear of failure. Fear of emotional exposure. And until a man confronts those fears, he will sabotage the very love he prays for. That night, Marcus picked up his phone and stared at Elena's name for almost an hour, not knowing what to say, not knowing if she'd answer. But sometimes growth begins with one honest moment, one truthful sentence, one decision to stop hiding. And finally, Marcus typed the words he had avoided his entire life. I miss you. And I think I've been afraid to let you truly know me. Marcus stared at the message after sending it, his heart pounding harder than it had during any job interview, any financial struggle, any fight life had thrown at him. Because this was different. This was exposure. This was honesty without armor. Minutes passed with no reply. And in those silent minutes, Marcus felt every emotion he had spent years running from. Regret, fear, shame, Jing, hope. Then finally, the phone lit up. 3 simple words. I know, Marcus. That message broke something open inside him. Not because it solved everything, not because pain disappeared overnight, but because for the first time, he realized honesty creates space for healing. A lot of men think love is about winning arguments, proving strength, or staying in control. But real love begins when 2 people feel emotionally safe enough to tell the truth. And Marcus has spent his whole life avoiding truth. A few days later, Elena agreed to meet him at a small cafe downtown. Marcus arrived early, nervous like a young man on his first date. But this time, he wasn't trying to impress her. He wasn't rehearsing clever lines or pretending to be perfect. He was tired of pretending. When Elena walked in, Marcus immediately noticed something different in her eyes. She still cared, but she was guarded now. Love can survive pain, but trust becomes careful after disappointment. They sat across from each other quietly for a moment. Then Elena spoke softly. Why now? That question hit deep. Why now? Why do so many men wait until love is slipping away before they finally become him? To be oceanly honest, Marcus looked down at his hands and answered carefully. Because I finally realized I've been surviving relationships instead of truly living inside them. Elena didn't interrupt. And Marcus continued, I thought my job was to be strong all the time. I thought if I showed fear or pain, I'd lose respect. So every time I felt overwhelmed, I shut down. Every time I needed comfort, I acted distant instead. Elena's eyes filled with tears because for the first time she was hearing the real man behind the mask. You see, women often don't leave because a man struggles. They leave because they feel emotionally locked out of his world. There's a huge difference. People can handle hardship together. People can survive difficult seasons. But emotional disconnection slowly suffocates love. Marcus finally understood that. And maybe some men listening right now need to understand it too. A woman cannot build intimacy with silence. She cannot connect with walls. She cannot feel close to a man who only shows strength but never truth. Marcus leaned forward and admitted something he had never said aloud before. I think I learned how to hide before I ever learned how. W to love. And that sentence carried years of pain inside it, because many boys grow into men without ever being taught emotional language. They learn responsibility, competition, discipline, survival. But nobody teaches them how to communicate hurt without anger. Nobody teaches them how to ask for reassurance without shame. So what happens? Men start confusing emotional isolation with masculinity. They think shutting down makes them strong. They think silence makes them powerful. But silence often creates distance where love was trying to grow. Eleanor reached for Marcus's hand carefully. And in that moment, Marcus realized something life-changing. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, not just physically, emotionally. The conversation lasted for hours. No shouting, no games, no pretending, just truth. And truth changes relationships. Marcus told her about the pressure he felt growing up, the fear of failure that followed him every day, the anxiety he hid behind confidence, the loneliness he carried even while smiling. And Elena finally understood something too. Behind many emotionally distant men is an emotionally wounded boy who never learned how. W to feel safe expressing himself. That doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it explains the silence. As the evening ended, Elena looked at Marcus and said something powerful. You know what I wanted most from you? Marcus shook his head slowly. Not perfection, just honesty. That sentence stayed with him long after they left the cafe. Because men often exhaust themselves trying to become impressive while forgetting that emotional authenticity is what creates real connection. And here's the truth nobody tells men about love. The right woman doesn't need you to be fearless. She needs you to be real. Now, don't misunderstand this message. Being emotionally open does not mean becoming emotionally careless. A man still needs discipline, purpose, and self-control. But strength without emotional honesty becomes loneliness wearing confidence as a disguise. Marcus began changing slowly after that day. Not overnight, not magically. Growth is never instant. There were still moments he wanted to shut down during difficult conversations. Still moments where pride whispered, don't say too much. Don't let her see weakness. Stay guarded. But every time he chose honesty instead, eat of avoidance, the relationship became stronger. That's how healing works. Not through giant speeches, through small, consistent decisions. One honest conversation, one apology, one vulnerable moment at a time. And little by little, Marcus stopped viewing love as a battlefield because many men unknowingly treat relationships like competitions. They want to win arguments, protect ego, avoid accountability, maintain control. But love is not war. If someone must lose for you to feel powerful, the relationship is already dying. Marcus learned to listen instead of defend, to understand instead of react, to communicate instead of disappear emotionally. And one night, Elena asked him something that changed his perspective forever. When was the last time someone asked how you were really doing? Marcus thought about it for a long moment, then quietly answered, honestly, maybe never. That's the hidden pain many men carry. People depend on men, need men, expect from men. But very few people stop and ask men if they're emotionally okay. So men suffer silently. Then society wonders why so many men become emotionally numb, angry, disconnected, or depressed. Pain unspoken doesn't disappear. It transforms, sometimes into rage, sometimes into addiction, sometimes into coldness, sometimes into emotional absence. Marcus realized he had been emotionally starving for years while pretending he was fine. And here's another truth nobody tells men. A man who never receives emotional support will eventually struggle to give emotional support because you cannot pour endlessly from an empty soul. One weekend, Marcus visited his father after months of distance between them. His father sat quietly on the porch, older now, slower now. Time had carved exhaustion into his face. For years, Marcus viewed his father as emotionally untouchable, a hard man, a silent man. But this time, Marcus saw something different: loneliness. They talked for hours about life, work, regret, family. And then Marcus asked his father something unexpected. Were you happy? The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the distance with tired eyes. Then finally said, I knew how to provide. I just never learned how to connect. Marcus felt tears forming instantly because suddenly he understood the tragedy many men live through. They spend decades becoming G providers while their emotional world slowly dies from neglect. His father continued speaking quietly. My generation thought love meant sacrifice and responsibility. Nobody taught us emotional intimacy. Nobody taught us how to talk about pain. And there it was. Generational silence. One wounded man raising another wounded man without realizing it. Not because they lacked love, because they lacked emotional tools. Marcus hugged his father before leaving that night, and that hug carried years of unspoken emotions inside it. Driving home, Marcus realized something powerful. Healing doesn't just change you. It changes everyone connected to you. When a man learns emotional honesty, he becomes a safer partner, a better father, a better friend, a better human being. But healing requires courage, because eventually every man must confront this question. Am I protecting my heart or imprisoning it? There's a difference. Guarding your peace is healthy. Building emotional walls so high nobody can reach you is loneliness disguised as strength. And sadly, many men only realize that after love leaves. Months passed, and Marcus and Elena slowly rebuilt their relationship. Not perfectly. Real love is never perfect, but it became more honest, more human. One evening, while sitting together watching the rain outside the apartment window, Eleanor rested her head on Marcus's shoulder and whispered softly, You feel different now. Marcus smiled gently, not because he had become a different man overnight, but because he had finally stopped hiding from himself. And that's the truth most men spend years avoiding. The hardest part about love is not finding someone. It's allowing yourself to be fully seen by them. The rain kept falling outside the apartment window while Marcus sat quietly beside Elena, thinking about how different life felt when he stopped fighting his own emotions. For years, he believed strength meant carrying everything alone. Now he was beginning to understand that real strength sometimes means allowing someone to stand beside you while you carry the weight. And that realization changed everything. But healing has a dangerous stage most people never talk about. The moment you begin opening your heart, old fears start screaming louder than ever. Because once you spent years hiding behind emotional walls, vulnerability feels unfulfilling, natural. Even when love is safe, your mind still expects pain. Marcus learned that the hard way. A few weeks later, Elena noticed him becoming distant again. Short replies, quiet moves, emotional withdrawal. The old pattern slowly creeping back into the relationship. One night she finally asked him, "What's happening to you?" Marcus wanted to say nothing. The same line men say every single day. But this time he stopped himself. Because growth means catching yourself before destruction repeats. So instead, he took a deep breath and answered honestly, "I'm scared." Elena looked surprised. "Scared of what?" Marcus stared at the floor for a moment before speaking. "Scared that if you really know all of me, eventually you'll leave anyway. Now listen carefully, because this is one of the deepest truths about men and love. Many men do not fear love itself. They fear abandonment after emotional exposure. That fear changes everything. It makes men act emotionally unavailable. It makes them sabotage healthy relationships. It makes them pull away when things get serious. It makes them pretend not to care too much. Because deep down, many men believe this. If she sees my way, weaknesses, she'll stop loving me. And some men learn that lesson painfully through rejection, betrayal, humiliation, or childhood wounds. Marcus remembered his first heartbreak when he was younger. Back then, he gave everything to someone who mocked his emotions, used his vulnerability against him, and left him feeling ashamed for caring deeply. After that experience, he promised himself something dangerous. Never let anyone see you weak again. And from that moment forward, he became emotionally armored. That's what heartbreak does to many men. It doesn't just hurt them, it hardens them. A wounded man often becomes emotionally defensive long before he becomes emotionally healed. Elena listened carefully as Marcus shared things he had buried for years, and then she said something powerful. "You don't have to earn love by pretending to be unbreakable." That sentence hit Marcus deeply because most men spend their lives trying to become invincible. But nobody is invincible. Not the businessman, not the athlete, not the father, not the leader. Every man gets tired. Every man feels fear. Every man carries invisible battles. The difference is, some men learn how to speak about those battles while others bury them until they emotionally collapse. Marcus was finally learning how to speak. And the more honest he became, the more peace entered his life. Not because life became easier, because he stopped carrying everything alone internally. One Sunday afternoon, Marcus went for a walk through the city by himself. He watched couples laughing, families talking, children running beside their parents. And suddenly he noticed something he had ignored for years. Most people are not searching for perfection. They're searching for emotional safety. Think about that. People stay where they feel emotionally safe, where they feel heard, seen, valued, accepted. And many men accidentally create emotional distance because they think being emotionally guarded protects them from pain. But guarded hearts also block connection. Marcus sat on a park bench thinking about how many relationships fail, not because love disappears, but because communication disappears first. Silence grows, resentment grows, pride grows, and eventually two people who love each other begin feeling like strangers. That's why emotional maintenance matters in relationships just as each has financial responsibility or physical attraction. Love cannot survive long-term emotional neglect. A lot of men say, "I'm here, aren't I?" But physical presence is not the same as emotional presence. You can share a house with someone and still make them feel alone. Marcus realized he had done that for years without meaning to. Later that evening, he visited an old friend named Daniel. They hadn't spoken deeply in a long time. Daniel was recently divorced after 12 years of marriage. And as they sat together talking late into the night, Daniel confessed something heartbreaking. "I thought providing was enough." Marcus stayed quiet because he understood exactly what he meant. Daniel continued, "I worked nonstop, paid every bill, took care of responsibilities, but emotionally, I stopped showing up. I stopped listening, stopped communicating. Eventually, my wife stopped feeling loved, even though I never stopped loving her." That's a painful truth many men discover too late. Love is not only what you feel, it's what the other person experiences from you consistently. You can love someone deeply in your heart, but if they constantly feel ignored, emotionally disconnected, or unseen, the relationship slowly stars. Daniel looked exhausted as he spoke. "You know what hurts the most?" Marcus shook his head. "She begged for emotional connection long before she left. I just didn't understand it at the time." That sentence stayed heavy in the room because sometimes people leave physically long after they've already become emotionally exhausted. Marcus drove home thinking about all the men silently losing relationships while believing everything is fine, simply because nobody is arguing loudly. But silence is not always peace. Sometimes silence is emotional surrender. And that's why communication matters so much. Not fake communication, not surface level conversation, real communication, the kind where you talk about fears, dreams, disappointments, insecurities, pressures, stress, emotional needs, the kind many men were never taught. That night, Marcus and Elena cooked dinner together while music played softly in the background. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just two people learning each other again. And in that simple moment, Marcus understood another truth about love nobody tells men. Love is built in ordinary moments. Number only anniversaries, not only vacations, not only big speeches. Love grows through daily emotional consistency. The way you greet her after work, the way you listen when she talks, the way you notice her moods, the way you make her feel emotionally safe. Small things become big things over time, and neglect works the same way. People rarely wake up one morning and suddenly stop caring. Disconnection usually happens slowly, quietly, over months and years of emotional distance. Marcus became intentional after realizing that. He started asking deeper questions, started expressing appreciation more openly, started saying how he truly felt instead of expecting Elena to read his mind. And something surprising happened. The relationship became lighter because emotional honesty removes emotional guessing. Many relationships suffer because both people secretly need reassurance, but neither knows how to ask for it properly. Pride keeps them silent. Fear keeps them guarded. Ego keeps them disconnected. Marcus finally stopped letting ego control his relationships. And one night, Elena asked him, "What changed you the most?" Marcus thought carefully before answering, realizing, I was more afraid of being hurt than I was committed to loving fully. That's a truth many men need to face. Fear can quietly ruin love. Fear of betrayal, fear of rejection, fear of looking weak, fear of needing someone emotionally. And when fear controls a man's heart, he often becomes emotionally unavailable without realizing it. Not cruel, not evil, just disconnected. Marcus had lived that way for years, but now he understood something powerful. Love requires emotional risk. There is no deep connection without vulnerability, no intimacy without honesty, no lasting relationship without emotional courage. And yes, vulnerability can lead to pain, but emotional isolation leads to loneliness. You must choose your heart. As time passed, Marcus also began healing his relationship with himself. Because another truth nobody tells men is this. If a man secretly hates himself, struggles to value himself, or feels emotionally broken inside, eventually it affects the way he loves others. Internal wounds always leak into relationships. That's why self-awareness matters. Marcus started journaling at night, started reflecting instead of suppressing, started understanding his emo. Chanel triggers instead of exploding or shutting down. And slowly he became calmer, more grounded, more emotionally mature. Not perfect, but conscious. And conscious men love differently. One evening, Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror after a long day and barely recognized himself emotionally. Not because his appearance changed, because his spirit has softened, not weakened, softened. There's a difference. A hardened man protects himself from love. A healed man learns how to receive it. And maybe that's the greatest truth nobody tells men. Love does not become beautiful when you find the perfect person. Love becomes beautiful when you stop running from emotional truth. Marcus began noticing life differently after that, not because the world suddenly became easier, but because his heart was no longer constantly at war with itself. For years, he lived like many men do, exhausted emotionally, pretending to be okay, carrying pressure silently while hoping love would somehow survive his emotional absence. But now he understood something most men never realize until much later in life. Love is not maintained by intentions alone. It is maintained by attention. Ninth attention is one of the purest forms of love. The way you listen, the way you respond, the way you notice when someone's spirit feels heavy, the way you make them feel emotionally important. Marcus finally understood why so many relationships slowly die even when love still exists. Because people don't only need commitment, they need connection. One cold evening during winter, Marcus and Elena attended a small gathering at a friend's house. Music played softly in the background while couples laughed and shared stories around the living room. Everything looked normal from the outside, but Marcus noticed something strange. One of the men at the gathering sat quietly in the corner almost the entire night, while his wife smiled politely around guests. They barely looked at each other, barely spoke. The energy felt distant. Later that night, Marcus found himself talking to the man privately outside near the balcony. The man sighed deeply and said, "We're probably getting divorced." Marcus looked shocked because from the outside they looked fine. Then the man said something painful. "We stopped emotionally choosing each other a long time ago." That sentence stayed with Ma. You are caused deeply because many relationships don't collapse suddenly. They slowly fade from emotional neglect. People stop communicating, stop appreciating each other, stop trying, stop opening up, stop listening. And eventually, two people who once felt inseparable become emotionally unfamiliar. The man leaned against the railing and laughed sadly. "You know what's crazy? I spent years thinking love would naturally survive if I stayed loyal and worked hard." Marcus nodded slowly, because that's what many men believe. They think, "I'm not cheating, I'm paying bills, I'm staying committed, and those things matter." But relationships also need emotional effort. Love needs nurturing, attention, affection, presence. A relationship ignored emotionally will eventually starve no matter how strong it once felt. On the drive home that night, Marcus held Elena's hand tighter than usual. And in that quiet moment, he realized something powerful. The greatest danger in love is not always betrayal. Sometimes it's complacency, getting too comfortable, assuming someone will always stay, forgetting to emotionally water the relationship. That's how people drift apart. Not always through GH explosions, sometimes through silence and routine. Weeks later, Marcus and Elena took a short trip outside the city to a small cabin near a lake. No phones, no distractions, just peace. One evening, they sat outside under the stars, wrapped in blankets while the wind moved softly through the trees. And Elena asked him quietly, "What do you think men need most but rarely admit?" Marcus thought about it carefully, then answered honestly, "To feel emotionally safe without being judged." Elena nodded immediately because she knew it was true. Many men are starving emotionally while pretending they're fine. Society celebrates men for achievement but rarely teaches them emotional wellness. Men are rewarded for endurance, not emotional openness. So they become masters at suffering silently. And silent suffering changes people. Some men become cold. Some become angry. Some emotionally disappear inside relationships. Some become addicted to distractions because distractions feel easier than emotional honesty. Marcus realized he had almost become one of those men. He looked at Elena and admitted something deeply personal. "There were years I felt emotionally lost, but didn't know how to explain it." And that's another truth nobody tells men. Many men cannot communicate emotions properly because nobody ever taught them emotional vocabulary. They know frustration, anger, stress, but underneath those emotions often lies sadness, fear, disappointment, insecurity, loneliness. Yet many men were conditioned to translate all emotional pain into silence or anger because those felt safer. Marcus stared at the lake while memories flooded his mind. The pressure to succeed, the fear of failure, the constant need to appear strong, the emotional loneliness he carried even in crowded rooms. Then quietly he said, "I think men spend so much time trying to become valuable that they forget they're human too." That sentence carried years of hidden exhaustion because many men feel loved conditionally. Loved when successful, loved when chooseful, loved when productive, loved when emotionally controlled. So eventually they begin believing their worth depends entirely on performance. And that belief destroys emotional peace. Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder and whispered softly, "You deserve love even on the days you feel broken." Marcus closed his eyes after. ER hearing those words because deep down many men have never truly believed that. A lot of men secretly believe they must earn love endlessly, earn respect, earn attention, earn emotional care. But healthy love is not constant performance. Healthy love is partnership. And partnership means both people feel emotionally seen. That night, Marcus realized something life-changing. A relationship becomes powerful when two people stop pretending and start understanding each other's pain compassionately, not competing, not blaming. Understanding, that's what creates intimacy, not perfection. Emotional honesty, Months passed, and Marcus continued growing into a more emotionally aware man. He became more patient during difficult conversations, more willing to apologize, more intentional with his words. And something beautiful happened because of it. Peace entered his life, not because problems disappeared, because emotional maturity replaced emotional avoidance. You see, unresolved emotions create internal chaos, but emotional awareness creates clarity. Marcus no longer felt the need to constantly prove himself through ego or emotional distance. He no longer believed shutting down. New own made him strong. Now he understood this. A mature man communicates. A wounded man withdraws. And there's a huge difference between the two. One evening, Marcus visited his mother after not seeing her for weeks. They sat together in the kitchen drinking coffee while soft music played from the old radio nearby. At one point, his mother looked at him carefully and smiled. "You seem lighter these days." Marcus smiled softly back. "I think I finally stopped fighting myself." His mother nodded like she understood everything without him needing to explain. Then she said something that brought tears to his eyes. "You know, your father loved deeply. He just didn't know how to express it." Marcus looked down quietly because suddenly he understood something heartbreaking about so many men. Some men love with their actions but fail with emotional communication. They work hard, sacrifice, protect, provide, but emotionally they remain unreachable. And sadly, people cannot always feel love that is never verbally or emotionally expressed. That realization changed Marcus forever. From that point on, he became intentional about saying things many men leave unsaid. You ate you? I'm proud of you. I need you. I love you. I'm struggling. Thank you for staying. Simple words, powerful impact because emotional expression strengthens connection. And maybe that's one of the biggest truths nobody tells men. The words you avoid saying today may become the regrets you carry tomorrow. Time moves fast, people change, life shifts unexpectedly, and one day you realize moments matter more than ego ever did. Marcus understood that now. One night while lying beside Elena, he asked her softly, "Why did you stay?" Elena looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Because underneath your walls, I always saw your heart." Marcus felt tears fill his eyes instantly. Because deep down, every man wants to be loved not just for his strength, but for his humanity. Not just for what he provides, but for who he truly is inside. And that is the truth about love nobody tells men. Love is not about becoming emotionless. It's not about pretending you never hurt. It's not about acting tough every second of your life. Real love begins the moment a man stops hiding behind pride and allows himself to become emotionally honest. Because at the end of the day, the strongest man is not the one who feels nothing. The strongest man is the one brave enough to feel deeply and still choose love anyway. And maybe after hearing this story, some men will finally understand what life has been trying to teach them all along. Love was never meant to make you weaker. Love was meant to make you more honest. Not every man loses love because he lacks loyalty. Sometimes he loses love because he never learned how to emotionally open his heart before it was too late. So if you are listening right now, stop hiding behind silence. Stop pretending you don't need reassurance, healing, understanding, or connection. Because being emotionally human does not make you less of a man. In many ways, it is what finally makes you whole. And one day, the people who truly love you will not remember how tough you tried to appear. They will remember how safe, honest, present, and genuine you made them feel. That is the kind of strength that lasts forever.